What happens when you're too strong for a narcissist to control? Psychologists often note that the moment you become too strong for a narcissist to dominate is the moment their entire strategy is threatened. Strength, in this context, is not aggression or confrontation. It is emotional sovereignty. When a narcissist senses that their usual tactics no longer provoke fear, guilt, or confusion, their behavior shifts dramatically. This is why survivors frequently ask whether narcissists eventually back down. From a clinical perspective, what actually happens is not surrender, but destabilization. The narcissist experiences what psychologists call a narcissistic injury, a rupture in their inflated self-image caused by the loss of control over another person. If your goal is to end the narcissist's behavior in a way that cannot be easily reversed, psychologists emphasize that this requires more than clever words. It requires a fundamental shift in how you present yourself emotionally. Certain truths, when delivered with calm detachment, act as psychological truth bombs. These do not merely unsettle the narcissist, they also disrupt the ecosystem around them, including enablers, flying monkeys, and those who unconsciously serve their agenda. What truly stops a narcissist is not exposure or argument, but the sudden absence of emotional supply. However, clinicians are careful to point out that no single approach applies universally. Narcissistic dynamics vary, and safety must always be the priority. Psychologists often advise survivors to build a toolbox of responses rather than relying on one strategy. This toolbox includes not only what you say, but how you say it. Research in interpersonal psychology consistently shows that tone, posture, and emotional energy often matter more than the content of words themselves, especially when dealing with personality disordered individuals. The emotional vibe you bring into an interaction is critical. Narcissists are highly attuned to emotional cues, not because of empathy, but because they are constantly scanning for leverage. When you approach an interaction with visible anxiety, anger, or a need to be understood, the narcissist interprets this as opportunity. Psychologists recommend adopting what is known as a low arousal state: calm, steady, and emotionally neutral. This alone can dramatically change the outcome of an interaction because it deprives the narcissist of the stimulation they seek. Maintaining composure is not about politeness or moral superiority. It is a protective strategy. Treating interactions with a narcissist as if they were business transactions, formal, factual, and emotionally distant, is widely recommended in clinical settings. This approach minimizes ambiguity and prevents emotional escalation. It also eliminates behaviors that narcissists weaponize, such as sarcasm, contempt, defensiveness, or reactive explanations. From a psychological standpoint, emotional reactivity signals vulnerability. Non-reactivity signals boundaries. What often feels counterintuitive to survivors is the instruction to stop trying to appease, reason with, or explain oneself. Psychologists emphasize that narcissists do not process information the way emotionally healthy adults do. You are not engaging with a rational negotiator. You are interacting with what many clinicians describe as an emotionally arrested adult. Beneath the grandiosity lies a fragile, underdeveloped emotional core driven by entitlement, insecurity, and a relentless need to win. This is why narcissists will go to extraordinary lengths to provoke, manipulate, or harm when they feel thwarted. Their behavior is not guided by conscience or mutual respect, but by outcome control. Psychologists note that when narcissists feel sufficiently threatened, they may distort reality, manipulate third parties, or pursue revenge with alarming intensity. This is not strategic brilliance. It is emotional dysregulation combined with a lack of empathy. Understanding this in advance allows victims to stop personalizing the behavior and instead focus on self-protection. One of the most disturbing reality psychologists highlight is that narcissists lack genuine empathy and a stable moral compass. Their identities oscillate between hero and victim, depending on which role grants them the most advantage. They rewrite history, fabricate narratives, and omit critical facts to maintain this illusion. To emotionally healthy individuals, this behavior seems incomprehensible, but to clinicians, it reflects a disordered internal world where truth is subordinate to self-image. For this reason, approaching a narcissist with compassion, patience, or emotional openness is rarely effective. Psychologists are unequivocal on this point. Empathy does not reform narcissistic behavior. Instead, it often prolongs abuse by signaling tolerance. Improving your communication skills, increasing your patience, or enduring more mistreatment will not inspire insight or accountability. These strategies work in healthy relationships, not in exploitative ones. What actually disengages a narcissist is the opposite of what feels natural. Survivors are often advised to adopt an emotionally flat, uninterested, and firm demeanor. This is not cruelty, it is boundary enforcement. Clear, concise, and unambiguous statements leave no room for manipulation. Phrases such as "no, I can't help you," or "that doesn't work for me" are powerful precisely because they deny the narcissist the emotional engagement they crave. Psychologists often remind clients that no is a complete sentence. Explanations invite debate. Debate invites control. Ultimately, becoming too strong for a narcissist does not mean overpowering them. It means becoming unreachable. When your emotions are no longer accessible, the narcissist loses their primary source of influence. This shift impacts both parties profoundly. The narcissist experiences frustration and loss of control, while the victim begins to reclaim autonomy and psychological safety. From a therapeutic standpoint, this is not just an interactional tactic, it is a milestone in recovery. When a narcissist continues to press the issue after you have already given a clear answer, psychologists emphasize that the most powerful response is not escalation, but finality. A simple statement such as "I've addressed your question," followed by silence, creates a psychological full stop. From a clinical standpoint, this works because narcissists thrive on engagement, arguments, clarifications, emotional reactions. Silence deprives them of stimulation and control. For the victim, this moment can feel unnerving, even frightening, because the nervous system has been conditioned to anticipate retaliation. Yet psychologists explain that this discomfort is a sign of withdrawal from a trauma bond, not danger. The narcissist, on the other hand, experiences this as a loss of dominance, which often triggers confusion rather than power. If this way of responding is new to you, mental health professionals caution that it will feel unnatural at first. Survivors are often accustomed to over-explaining, soothing, or defending themselves as a survival strategy. Learning to present facts without emotional charge requires practice because it asks the nervous system to remain regulated under perceived threat. Psychologists describe this as emotional decoupling, communicating information without attaching identity, worth, or urgency to it. Over time, as you practice this neutral delivery, your body learns that silence is not abandonment, it is protection. To permanently shut down a narcissist's attempts to provoke you, clinicians recommend aiming for maximum objectivity and minimum emotional visibility. After you speak, you stop. You do not fill the space. You allow the silence to do the work. Psychologically, silence forces the narcissist to confront their own internal instability. They cannot mirror, provoke, or dominate what is not reacting. For the victim, this pause is a grounding exercise. Taking a slow breath, maintaining posture, and staying present signals to your nervous system that you are safe and in control. Many survivors report that the quiet feels unbearable at first. Psychologists explain that this discomfort arises because silence disrupts familiar relational patterns. You were trained through idealization, devaluation, and intermittent reinforcement to respond quickly and emotionally. Allowing silence to exist rewires that conditioning. When you give yourself permission to sit in that quiet, you reclaim authority over your emotional energy. The narcissist, meanwhile, often interprets this calm as indifference, which they find far more threatening than anger. Clinicians also note that emotionally neutral phrases can be useful when disengagement is not immediately possible. Statements like "I see," "I'll consider that," or "I'll get back to you" serve as verbal placeholders. They acknowledge without committing. The key psychological principle here is non-investment. There is no sarcasm, no reassurance, no resistance, only neutrality. After delivering such a statement, silence must follow. Without silence, the narcissist senses an opening and re-enters the cycle of manipulation. When dealing with a highly toxic narcissist, psychologists often describe non-response as a form of advanced boundary setting. This does not mean suppressing emotion internally. It means refusing to externalize it where it can be exploited. Over time, as you become accustomed to the awkwardness of silence, you may notice that its impact surpasses any carefully crafted argument. Speech invites debate. Silence closes the door. For narcissists who rely on chaos and contradiction, this is profoundly destabilizing. Clear communication, when paired with emotional detachment, sends a decisive psychological message. I am not under your control. You are no longer seeking approval, resolution, or validation. From a therapeutic perspective, this shift represents the restoration of self-agency. The narcissist, who depends on influence and authority over others, finds this posture deeply unsettling. Silence following a firm boundary communicates disinterest without hostility, which leaves them nowhere to anchor their manipulation. Some people choose flat, non-reactive words such as okay, or that's noted, or even awesome, depending on context. Psychologists caution that the words themselves matter less than the absence of emotional charge. Once spoken, nothing follows. No justification, no clarification. The randomness of this emotional void forces the narcissist into uncertainty, which is psychologically intolerable for someone who needs control. At this point, the outcome no longer depends on persuasion. It depends on their inability to extract supply. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control you, their grip begins to dissolve. Clinically, this is the point at which they disengage, not because they have gained insight, but because the relationship no longer serves their psychological needs. For the victim, this disengagement feels like peace returning. Psychologists describe it as the nervous system exiting a prolonged state of hypervigilance. The narcissist seeks another target. You regain silence, space, and stability. Psychologists also explain why interactions with narcissists are often exhausting and combative. During the idealization phase, they appear agreeable, charming, and affirming, especially during love bombing. This phase is designed to hook you emotionally. Once it ends, the narcissist's true pattern emerges: automatic opposition. Disagreement becomes their reflex. The phrase, "I disagree," is not about content. It is about dominance. It is an attempt to reassert control. A calm response, such as asking them to repeat what they just said, can be an effective psychological mirror. When delivered without sarcasm or aggression, this tactic exposes inconsistencies and irrationality without confrontation. Psychologists explain that narcissists often collapse under their own contradictions when forced to hear themselves. This strategy protects the victim by shifting the burden of coherence back onto the narcissist. If the narcissist doubles down on an obviously false or distorted claim, a simple pause followed by a neutral observation, such as inviting them to reflect on their own words, can be enough. Importantly, clinicians warn that this technique should be used sparingly. The goal is not to educate or humiliate the narcissist, but to disengage. After you speak, silence must follow. That silence seals the boundary. In psychological terms, this entire approach represents a transition from reactive survival to conscious self-protection. You are no longer playing the role assigned to you. You are no longer explaining your humanity to someone incapable of honoring it. By mastering emotional neutrality, clear boundaries, and silence, you remove yourself from the narcissistic system altogether. And in that absence, peace is not something you chase. It is something that naturally returns. When the narcissist is finally compelled to confront the irrationality, and at times the emotional coldness within themselves, psychologists note that this moment is not the result of insight, but of containment. You have disrupted the illusion that they control the narrative. By calmly outlining consequences such as being removed from the game after repeated dishonesty or disrespect, you introduce boundaries that function like psychological guardrails. Narcissists intuitively recognize danger when consequences are clearly defined, because limits threaten their sense of entitlement. Faced with this reality, many will retreat or concede, not because they agree, but because further engagement no longer benefits them. For the victim, this is empowering. It restores agency without inviting escalation. Clinicians emphasize that brevity is critical in these exchanges. Communicating your position in as few words as possible prevents the narcissist from exploiting ambiguity. Clarity paired with emotional restraint sends a powerful message. There is nothing here to negotiate. Maintaining composure is not about suppression. It is about regulation. From a psychological standpoint, emotional eruptions feed narcissistic supply, whereas calm neutrality starves it. You are not required to explain yourself, justify your stance, or defend your reasoning. Explanations invite debate, and debate is where narcissists thrive. A consistently cool demeanor and controlled body language further reinforce this boundary. Psychologists describe this as congruence. When words, tone, and posture align, the message becomes unassailable. Taking a deep breath before responding helps stabilize your nervous system, preventing the fight or flight response that narcissists often provoke. Simple, disarming questions such as, "Are you okay?" can momentarily redirect the narcissist's aggression inward. This works because it subtly shifts the focus from control to self-reflection, even if only briefly. You can expect hostility in response, but the goal is not harmony. It is disengagement. When you follow such a question with silence, you are declaring that the interaction has reached its conclusion. Psychologists liken this to closing a circuit. The message has been transmitted, and the channel is now shut down. At this point, you are no longer participating in the narcissist's emotional economy. You are also signaling, implicitly, that you are observing patterns of behavior. Narcissists, who fear exposure more than confrontation, are often deeply unsettled by the sense that their actions are being noted rather than absorbed. It is crucial to understand that narcissists lack discretion and respect for boundaries. Despite outward confidence, they are deeply insecure. Psychologists explain that insecure individuals compulsively gather information about others as a way to gain leverage, even if that information is distorted or false. This is why phrases like "that's none of my business" are so effective. They deny the narcissist access to data while affirming your right to privacy. The silence that follows does the rest of the work, reinforcing that you will not be drawn into invasive or degrading conversations. When a narcissist becomes pushy, they may feign understanding with statements such as "that's interesting" or "I can see why you'd be angry." Therapists caution that this is often strategic empathy, not genuine concern. A grounded response like "what you choose to believe is entirely up to you" removes responsibility from your shoulders and places it squarely back on them. You are no longer managing their perceptions or emotions. Alternatively, saying "when you're in a better state of mind, we can talk," followed by physically walking away, asserts both emotional and spatial boundaries, two elements narcissists find profoundly destabilizing. Ending the interaction decisively is vital. Statements such as "let's stop here before this gets worse," paired with immediate disengagement, close the door without slamming it. Psychologically, this prevents rumination and reduces the risk of re-engagement. For the narcissist, the abrupt loss of access can trigger frustration or rage, but it also forces them to seek supply elsewhere. For you, leaving the environment restores a sense of safety and control. Dealing with narcissistic enablers or flying monkeys requires similar discipline. These individuals often masquerade as compassionate intermediaries. If they claim concern for your well-being, psychologists recommend acknowledging the sentiment without surrendering autonomy. A response such as, "the choices I make for my safety and well-being are not your responsibility, but thank you," followed by silence, protects your boundaries while maintaining dignity. The silence is essential. It prevents further probing disguised as care. You may also choose firmer statements like, "I've already said I'm not discussing this and I stand by that," or "I need you to respect my space." These responses work because they are definitive and emotionally flat. Even saying, "I don't know what to say to you," or remaining completely silent can be effective. What matters most, psychologists stress, is not the exact wording but the delivery. Self-respect, neutrality, and finality. Over time, narcissists learn through repetition what they cannot extract from you. Practicing these strategies in low-stakes situations builds confidence and neural familiarity, making it easier to deploy them when the emotional stakes are higher. From a therapeutic perspective, This practice rewires learned helplessness into assertive calm. Eventually, your communication alone conveys the message. You are no longer available for manipulation. At its core, this approach is not about winning arguments. It is about reclaiming psychological sovereignty. When you speak with dignity, remain emotionally unattached, and disengage without drama, you remove yourself from the narcissistic cycle altogether. And in that absence, something remarkable happens. Peace becomes the dominant force, not because the narcissist changed, but because you did.